Hi everyone. So I thought that it would be a good idea to practice some questions from the topic that I have delivered in my previous video, Theories and Methods. So I just googled the paper. It is May-June 2016 O-level sociology paper, and I thought that I'd attempt this so that you can get an idea of how questions are like and how you have to answer them. So it's question 1. It's from Theories and Methods, and as you all know, Theories and Methods you get a compulsory question in Sociology O-level. And in this question, we have a short excerpt before the question, so I'm just going to read that with you. Rosenthal and Jacobson designed experiment to test the hypothesis that teachers' expectations of their pupils' abilities create a self-fulfilling prophecy. They selected a random sample of 20% of primary school pupils in California. The researchers then gave these pupils an IQ test. Their teachers were given false test results, where pupils with high scores were selected at random. They were not necessarily the pupils with the highest IQ scores. The pupils were then given a second IQ test 8 months later. Those pupils with the high score in the false test had made the greatest gains in the IQ. The results of the experiment appeared to support Rosenthal and Jacobson's hypothesis that the way teachers interact with the pupils with high IQ scores encourage those pupils to do better in school. So I'd say before starting any question, like everybody tells you that you have to read it carefully and you have to read it twice. Okay, so now we'll move to our questions, and I'll just walk you through each question and I'll guide you how you can answer each question. And there can be many ways you can answer one question, but it's just my interpretation and my way of answering these questions. So we move with question number 1, part A, which says the examiner is asking us, identify 2 reasons why researchers might use a random sample. So there could be many possible answers. So first, in order to break down the question, first we need to analyze the strengths of random sampling. So in random sampling, the respondents or the people who are going to be part of the research have an equal chance of being selected, because as the name suggests, the sample is random. And then in random sampling, you can also make generalizations, because you don't know the people that are being selected can be of any age, any gender, any ethnicity, any culture. And then another good strength of random sampling is that they're free of any biases. So you do not decide beforehand that I want this type of a person or that type of a person. You're selecting randomly. Okay, so now we move on to question number 1, part B. And the examiner is asking us, identify 2 methods that might be used to research classroom behavior. So this is a very easy question. You could say that we can use overt or covert participant observation, we can use questionnaires, we can use interviews. And in order to understand what we mean by covert or overt or questionnaires or interviews, you can watch my Theories and Methods video. I've explained that there. Okay, so now we move on to part C. So in part C, this is a 4-mark question, and you need to give 2 reasons in order to get full 4 marks. So in part C, the examiner asks us, use information from source A, describe 2 ways in which field experiments might be unethical. Okay, so one of your explanation for the experiment being unethical is, one of your reason would be that the teachers are being deceived. And how are they being deceived? So obviously, deception is something that is unethical. And in a good research, you should not deceive the participant. So how are they being deceived? They're being deceived by, here it mentions, their teachers were given false results where pupils with high scores were selected at random. So this is deception. You are not telling them the truth. And secondly, a second reason of how the research was unethical is that the participants are not being informed. There is no informed consent. There is no debriefing happening over here. The researchers are not telling the students why are they being observed. So this is also unethical. So one reason is how the teachers are being deceived. And the second reason is you are not getting any informed consent from the students. And in this way, if you answer that question, if you mention 2 clear reasons and give reasonings, you will get full 4 marks. Okay, so now we move on to our question number part D. So in part D, the examiner is asking us, describe 2 reasons for using a hypothesis in sociological research. So first of all, you need to know what is a hypothesis. So hypothesis is a testable statement that you form before before carrying out the main research. And the examiner is asking us, why do we even need to make a hypothesis? So one of the reasons could be that making a hypothesis saves you time, money, and energy, because you need to be clear what you are going to research on. And the passage that we read, the excerpt that we read, both the researchers knew what was their aim and how they were going to carry out their research. So one reason is that it saves you time, money, and energy, and second is that it guides you how you are going to carry out your research. You have a question in your mind and you have something that you need to prove, and it basically tells you how you are going to follow your research. And while forming the question, you may also research on the internet and Google it, and you may find certain secondary resources if you have made a hypothesis. So this is going to help you really well in your research. So one of the reasons I am going to reiterate is that it saves you time, money, and energy. And second is that it guides you along your research. It sets you apart. Okay, so now we're going to move on to part E, which says describe two strengths and two limitations of using the structuralist approach in sociological research. So you need to break down that question, and we're aiming for full marks. So I'd say we're going to divide this question into two parts. One is strengths and the other is limitations. So in strengths, you mainly have to mention two major points in order to get 4 marks. And in limitations, you're going to mention 2 limitations in order to get the other 4 marks. So you get full 8 by mentioning 4 major reasons. So in strengths, the first major reason is that structuralist approach is basically based on positivism. It's a positivism ideology, and positivists basically look at things quantitatively, and they value quantitative research. One of the reasons for framing your sociological research in the context of structuralism, one of the strengths would be that your research is going to be high in reliability, because you're going to use quantitative methods such as structured interviews, such as content analysis. So it's going to be high in reliability, and you can also check that reliability against other sources. Secondly, your research is when you're going to use quantitative research methods, then your research is going to be objective, because it's going to be based on numbers. No biases are going to come into that. And then with numbers, obviously we all know that we can draw comparisons with numbers. We can see trends and patterns with numbers. So these are the 2 strengths that you would mention of using structuralist approach in sociological research. And limitations. Now we need to mention 2 limitations. So limitations, in the context, I would like to give you a context where, so in direct opposition to positivists, we have interpretivists. So interpretivists believe that we need to make use of qualitative research methods while carrying out the sociological research. So limitations would be, what the interpretivist critique also is, that a structuralist research approach is going to lack validity, because you understand the how part, but you do not understand the why part. Why is something happening? You only get a number, and a number is not explanatory. But through explanations, you can understand something. You can understand the why part because the respondent is answering you. So one limitation is that this kind of structuralist research is going to lack validity. And second limitation is that through this, we cannot carry out in-depth analysis of the research that is being carried out. We cannot make wider conclusions. We cannot analyze it in more depth. I'm again going to reiterate two strengths of using structuralist approach in sociological research is that it's going to be high in reliability, and it's going to be high in objectivity, through which we can make comparative analysis. Second, for limitations, I'm going to give 2 reasons. It's going to lack validity, and we will not get in-depth answers. So moving on, we move to our second last part, which says the examiner asks us, explain why research using one method may not be accurate. So the answer is really in the question. When the examiner themselves are saying, explain why using only one method may not be accurate. So just for the context, I'd say hypothetically, if you think, if I'm a researcher and I'm going to research something, if I'm using only quantitative methods, then there are going to be a lot of limitations that are going to come with it. In using one method, you are going to lack validity, you're going to lack reliability, you're going to miss out on if you are using a quantitative method, then obviously you're going to lack validity. You do not have the option to make wider conclusions. You do not understand the why part of the research. And if you're using qualitative, then obviously you're going to lack reliability. It's going to be subjective. Your biases may come in. Obviously, you are asking mostly in qualitative research, you interview the participant, you're in the research, your biases may come in, so it's going to be subjective. So that's why they may not be accurate using one method. So how you can answer that question, how you can answer this question is by first giving the examiner some reasons. If somebody is using only quantitative research methods, then these are going to be this are going to be the limitations. It's going to lack validity, no in-depth conclusions, or wider, deeper understanding of the research. And if you're going to use, and then you give the examiner that if a researcher is going to use qualitative research methods, then what are going to be some of the limitations of that. Then you can move on by saying that this is why most of the researchers in sociology, they try to use the method called triangulation, which is a mix of 2 to 3 methods. So you have 2 quantitative methods of 1 qualitative methods through which you carry out your research. So your research can have good validity and also reliability, and can counter each other. Okay, so now we move on to our last question, which is part G, which says, to what extent does bias impact on the validity of field experiments? And you need to understand here to what extent. So what extent means that you need to give both sides over here. And we're going to break that question. And what does bias mean? So bias is when your own subjectivities come into the research, when your own interpretations influence your research results. So the answer is really in the question. So how is your bias going to impact the validity? Obviously, the validity is going to reduce a lot, because when a researcher's bias is going to come into the research results are going to be flawed. They're going to be inaccurate, and then you cannot. Obviously, it's not going to be credible research. So your validity is going to be reduced, because your own subjective opinions are going to come into play, and because you're seeing a thing from your own lens and not from a objective lens. So your feelings or your emotions may come in, and your validity is going to be reduced. To what extent? We have answered the 4 part of that answer. And the against part would be, the other side of the argument would be that some interpretivists claim that researchers can never be objective. So as humans, when we are studying humans, we are always subjective, and we are studying, as sociologists, we are studying the society, and in society we are not studying animals or we're not studying non-living plants. So humans have emotions, and their emotions can affect you, and your biases as a human too can intrude into the research. So interpretivists would argue that the validity wouldn't be compromised, because from the start, humans themselves are very subjective individuals, so that wouldn't really affect the validity. But on the other hand, jumping back to our first part, we'd say that positivists are going to be very critical about this idea, and they're going to say that these results are going to be like trash. They do not even consider this as sociological research or results that are going to be taken seriously, because positivists think that subjectivity is really compromise the aim of the research. So now I'm just going to summarize the answer for part G. So 4 arguments could be that there are going to be preconceived values that may lead the researcher only recording what they see that confirms their hypotheses. Like I said, your biases may intrude, and you're going to see what confirms your own biases. आप उसी चीज को record करोगे. The way the research is designed makes the experiment a social construct, which may mean the research is not valid. Social interaction between the research and the participant may cause bias. Personal values may affect the formation of research hypotheses, and participants' own values may cause them to mislead the researcher. So all these points point out to one thing, that your validity is going to be reduced because your subjectivities are going to come into research. And the arguments against it, as I stated earlier also, would be what interpretivists argue. They say that all social research is social construction and intrinsically biased. So whenever we start a research, from the day one, we're not objective at all. We start with our own subjectivities, the topic that we're going to research or the thing that we're interested in. It all boils down to the subjectivities that we have in our mind. And second, there is bias even in researchers' choice of research topic and method, like I said, and funding and try to please sponsors. So what kind of research you're picking up, what you're choosing also is a result of your own biases. So I hope that you find this video helpful, and if you find this video helpful, then please do comment below, and I'll get back to you soon with chapter 2. And please subscribe to my channel if you find my videos helpful, because this means a lot. And your support is going to encourage me to continue these series. So, and if you have any criticism, any kind of constructive feedback that you need to give me, because this is my first time at teaching, so please comment down below, and it can be positive or negative, wouldn't matter. So I just want to hear back from you, and thank you for listening, and goodbye.